Hello, everyone. She was the one who never chased fame, the one who rarely smiled for the camera, the one who made silence look like a superpower. In an era defined by noise, bold prints, bold poses, bold personalities, Tatjana Patitz was the whisper. While the other supermodels conquered the spotlight, she lingered in the shadows, draped in mystery. She wasn't the face you saw everywhere. She was the one you remembered without knowing why. She walked for Chanel, graced the cover of Vogue, and stood shoulder to shoulder with Naomi, Cindy, Linda, and Christy. But when the lights went out, Tatjana didn't go to parties. She went home to her horses, to her son, to the sea. She wasn't chasing the dream. She was protecting something more fragile, something real. And then, in 2023, the world woke up to headlines no one wanted to read. Tatjana Patitz had died, quietly, privately, just as she had lived. This is not a story of scandal. It's a story of stillness, of beauty that refused to perform, of a woman who chose presence over publicity and paid for it with a kind of invisibility the industry doesn't know how to honor. Her story begins not on the catwalk, but near the Baltic Sea, in a life shaped by both elegance and exile. Tatjana Patitz was born in Hamburg, Germany, in 1966, but her soul belonged elsewhere. Her father was a German journalist, her mother, an Estonian dancer who once graced the stage with a kind of poise that would later echo in her daughter. When Tatjana was a child, the family moved to the seaside town of Skanör, Sweden. There, between dunes and pine trees, far from the chaos of city life. She grew up with horses, wind, and silence. She wasn't a loud child. She preferred animals to people, books to parties, solitude to spectacle. While other girls played dress-up, Tatjana spent her time in the stables, brushing the coats of horses, memorizing the sound of their breath. Nature was her refuge. Her world was stillness, rhythm, intuition. And even as she grew into her long limbs and striking eyes, she never saw herself as beautiful. She saw herself as observant, watchful, invisible, if she wanted to be. At 17, everything changed. Her mother entered her into an elite model look competition without asking. She didn't win, but she didn't need to. One photograph, just one, was enough. The image traveled, whispers spread, agencies called, and soon. Tatjana was being flown to Paris, then New York, then Milan. It happened quickly, but Tatjana remained slow. Even as her career began to rise, she never chased it. She walked into casting rooms with the calm of someone who didn't need to impress anyone. She didn't flirt. She didn't smile for no reason. She didn't try to be liked, and yet, she was unforgettable. There was something in her stillness that made people look twice. Something in her distance that felt more intimate than closeness. She wasn't looking for fashion, but somehow, fashion found her. And the world would soon discover that still waters don't just run deep, they reshape everything they touch. Tatjana didn't storm into the fashion world. She drifted into it, not with hunger, but with gravity. When she arrived in Paris in the mid-1980s, she was just 18, barely fluent in French, and entirely unsure why she was there. The other girls at castings were louder, sharper, more eager. Tatjana sat in corners with her book, answering questions with the kind of brevity that unsettled people used to being flattered. She didn't chase the camera, but when it found her, something clicked. Her face didn't beg for attention. It invited contemplation. There was a kind of a melancholy in her eyes that felt honest, in an industry built on illusion. Photographers called her difficult, mysterious, detached, but they kept calling. Because when the shutter opened, Tatjana didn't pose, she revealed. Her breakthrough came not from a runway, but from a lens. Peter Lindbergh, one of the few photographers who understood that rawness was more powerful than gloss, saw in Tatjana something no one else had: stillness as strength. He shot her in black and white, without makeup, without pretense. And suddenly, the industry saw her differently. She wasn't the next girl. She was the first of something else. Her work with Lindbergh led to campaigns with Jill Sander, Calvin Klein, and the first of many Vogue covers. She didn't try to embody trends. She stood apart from them. In a time when supermodels were starting to become celebrities, Tatjana refused to play the game. She skipped after parties. She stayed off the gossip pages. While others courted fame, she returned to her horses in California, to her sketchbooks, to her silence. She had no interest in becoming iconic, which, of course, made her unforgettable. Tatjana Patitz didn't crash through the door of fashion. She walked in quietly and the room changed shape around her. In the early 1990s, Tatjana Patitz was everywhere, yet never all at once. She wasn't the face on every billboard. She wasn't the loudest in the pack. But when Vogue assembled the Big Five for Peter Lindbergh's legendary black and white cover, Tatjana stood in the middle, and she didn't need to speak to dominate the frame. She walked for Versace, Chanel, Donna Karan, and Helmut Lang. Her presence became a signal of elegance, of restraint, of something more soulful than sparkle. Designers adored her because she didn't just wear the clothes, she translated them. On the runway, her walk wasn't aggressive, it was grounded. She moved like she had nothing to prove, because she didn't. Photographers craved her mystery. Her Brits captured her under golden sunlight, effortless and elemental. Lindbergh made her his cinematic centerpiece. She was the woman who could hold the entire frame with a single glance, no theatrics, no artifice, just a gaze that felt like it had lived longer than its years. She didn't need gimmicks. She never sold scandal. She never chased press. While the world was chasing youth and spectacle, Tatjana offered something rarer: presence. A sense that behind the image was a mind thinking, a heart remembering, a soul choosing every moment with intention. At her peak, she could have had the endorsements, the movie roles, the product lines. But she turned much of it down. She valued solitude over celebrity, horses over headlines. When others flew city to city, she returned to her coastal home in Malibu, raised her son, kept a garden, let the noise pass without touching her. Her fame was never a performance. It was a side effect of authenticity, and that made it harder to package, harder to sell, but also impossible to replicate. Tatjana Patitz was not the most visible supermodel of the 90s, but she was, perhaps, the most unforgettable. Because what she gave wasn't just a look, it was a feeling. Tatjana Patitz never raised her voice, but everything about her career was an act of quiet rebellion. In an era that demanded visibility, she chose privacy. When the world wanted stars, she offered substance. While other models leaned into fame, Tatjana leaned out, and in doing so, she redefined what it meant to belong without surrendering who you are. She refused to move to New York at the peak of her career, choosing instead the open skies and wild coastline of California. While the fashion world spun faster and louder, she slowed down. She declined projects that didn't feel right. She skipped campaigns that asked her to become someone else. She didn't make statements, but she made decisions. And each one whispered, "I don't need this to be enough." Tatjana didn't build a brand. She built a life. She raised her son in nature, far from paparazzi, far from red carpets. She practiced yoga, rode horses, let her body age without apology. In an industry addicted to youth and reinvention, she simply evolved without fanfare, without fear. When asked in interviews why she stepped away, she said she never left. She was just living. She spoke softly about sustainability. Long before it became fashionable, she advocated for animals. She chose art over advertising. Her legacy wasn't built on selling products, it was built on preserving values. And even when the spotlight dimmed, she never tried to chase it back. She seemed to know something others hadn't figured out, that peace was its own form of power. In a world where models were praised for their adaptability, Tatjana's strength was her consistency. She didn't bend. She didn't brand. She simply remained herself. And that, in the context of an industry built on performance, was the most radical act of all. Tatjana Patitz didn't fight the system with noise. She outlived it in silence. Tatjana Patitz didn't vanish. She faded, not suddenly, not tragically, but gradually, like a candle that chooses when to burn low. While her peers stayed in the public eye with reality shows, memoirs, and brand partnerships, Tatjana slipped into the background, not because she was forgotten, but because she chose to live where the cameras couldn't find her. She never announced a retirement. She simply stopped appearing. One season, she walked a runway. The next, she was at home in Malibu, gardening, raising her son Jonah, riding horses along the coast. Interviews became rare, sightings even rarer. But those who met her during this time described her as grounded, radiant in her quietness, fully present in a way the fashion world never allowed her to be before. There was no scandal, no dramatic fall, just distance. And then one headline. On January 11, 2023, Tatjana Patitz died at the age of 56. The cause was metastatic breast cancer. Few people knew she had been ill. Fewer still had seen her in her final months. True to form, she kept her pain private. Her final years were spent in the company of her son, her animals, and the rhythms of a life she had built deliberately away from the runway, but close to something much more real. The news sent ripples through the industry. Designers posted tributes. Models who once stood beside her in silence now broke that silence to grieve. Peter Lindbergh had called her his favorite. Christy Turlington said she was the most soulful of them all, but the grief felt different this time. Quieter. Not just for the woman lost, but for the way she was lost without noise, without spectacle, just as she had lived. Tatjana's death wasn't a collapse, it was a closing, a quiet turning of the page. And for those who paid attention, it felt like the end of an era. She had always been the still one, the one who spoke through presence, not performance. And now, even in leaving, she remained true to herself. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't need to. Her absence said everything. Tatjana Patitz didn't chase legacy. She became one. Without shouting, without branding, without needing the world to applaud. Her presence was never about domination. It was about depth. In an industry addicted to the next big thing, she made us pause. Look again. Feel something. She reminded the world that beauty wasn't just in the face, but in how a person stood still and how they chose not to perform. She taught us that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers and leaves a deeper mark. Tatjana didn't live to be remembered. She lived to be real. And maybe that's why she haunts the memory more than any headline ever could. There are no statues, no perfume lines, no legacy foundations, just silence and a feeling, the kind that lingers long after the camera shuts off. She was the soul of the supermodel era, the one who walked away from the noise. And maybe, just maybe, that's what made her eternal. Maybe she didn't disappear. Maybe we just stopped looking closely enough.